Thank you for folks that were able to join live today, and hello to those of you who are listening to this as a recording. As Bridget mentioned, my name is Robin Niver. I work with the New York field office of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I am currently the species lead for the frosted elfin. I'm going on detail with our headquarters for 4 months, so from now until mid-May, and we're fortunate to have Nicole Rinaldi join us from the Pennsylvania field office on this call, and her contact information is provided at the end. You'll be able to reach out to her with any questions that you have about frosted elfin over the next several months. So thank you so much, Nicole. Next slide, please. For those of you who are new to the species or are just getting reacquainted, just wanted to remind folks that we are proactively assessing the status of all 3 subspecies of the frosted elfin. And this species is on our national listing work plan, which is available on our national endangered species website. And we are slated to provide a determination on the frosted elfin's listing status no later than September 30th of 2024. Next slide. So to help with this assessment of determining whether listing may be warranted, we embarked upon a species status assessment, or SSA, back in 2017. And in 2018, after completing phase 1 and phase 2 of this SSA, which is what does a species need and how is it doing, or what does it have right now, we put it on pause because we learned that we really lacked information to assess 86% of the previously identified populations. And so since that time, we've been really focusing on increasing our knowledge about the species. We developed survey protocols and have been working with all of you, our partners, to learn more about how frosted elfins are doing across the range. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and she's going to talk to you about these actual protocols that we're going to implement in 2021. Thanks, Katie. And you might be speaking on mute.
Yes, I was. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Katie Nolan, and I'm one of the coordinators of the Rapid Response Team working with the Science Applications Department. And I just wanted to give you a little overview of the survey efforts. So the purpose of today's webinar is to explain the regional survey effort. And we're going to cover training on the frosted elfin and the host plant identification, as well as the survey protocol. So we'll cover some highlights, but you can see the written protocols for full details on the survey procedures, as well as filling out the data fields on the data sheets. And I'm going to provide an overview of how to collect and submit survey data, and then ask for your input on training needs and any other questions you might have. But first, I'm going to hand it over to Becca, and she will cover SOP 1 and the identification of frosted elfins and host plants.
Thank you, Katie. I'm Becca Bartkovich. I'm also a member of the Rapid Response Team, and I also help with the frosted elfin surveys in 2019. So right here we have, we're going to talk about frosted elfin ID. Frosted elfins are known for their black spot, or their frost, or dusting of pale scales, and their short tails on their hind wings, as you can see with the red arrow there. You can also identify them from their behavior at a distance. You can spot them from rubbing their wings together, flying in a slow motion, having swirling courtship flights, and sometimes even playing dead when they feel threatened. Next. So these are frosted elfins at varying angles. We have Will Stewart's photos of a frosted elfin on Lupinus diffusus, taken in South Carolina. We have Alan Belden's on Lupinus perennis in Virginia. And we have Will Cook's on Baptisia tinctoria in North Carolina. So because we will survey in South Carolina this year, and I think we also have some people from South Carolina here with us today, we thought we'd also cover identifying the Arcis subspecies. And Arcis was last documented in coastal South Carolina, such as in Charleston, Berkeley, and Georgetown counties. And they were documented in the 1990s. And because we're still finding frosted elfins in South Carolina, we want to determine whether they are the subspecies Iris or Arcis. And we're in collaboration with Hunter Trowbridge, who is also on this call with us today, and who is doing his master's research on the validity of the Arcis subspecies and whether or not it's still extant. I will coordinate with him more on how we can help, whether it means collecting specimens from the field for genetic analysis, and which we'll need permits to do so, or if it means just simply contacting him when and if we think we spotted one in the field in one of those counties, and we would need to have photos for confirmation. But for now, what we know about Arcis is that it has been suggested to be a little larger, a little darker than Iris, is a wild indigo or Baptisia feeder, and would most likely be found on the coast. Next. So now looking at other elfins, such as the hoary, Henry's, brown, and pine elfins, one way you can tell the difference between them is by their host plant association. So listing the elfins from the photos left to right, we have frosted elfins that would be found on wild indigo and lupine. Hoary elfin would be found on bearberry. Henry's would be on holly or buckthorn. Brown elfin on blueberry or huckleberry. And pine elfins on pines, especially pitch pine. And we mentioned the red-banded hairstreak, which is not an elfin, but it has a similar shape and flight pattern, and it is found in the same habitat, so it's a good indicator species that you're in the right area to find frosted elfins. Next. So looking at the most similar species, we have the hoary and the Henry's elfin. Hoary elfin has frost on the upper forewing margin, and the frosted elfin does not have that, so you can tell between the two pictures. And hoary elfin also lacks a tail. Henry's elfin has more of a sharp coloration contrast between the inner and outer halves of the hindwing than the frosted elfins. So we'll provide a link on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website to a PowerPoint that gives more detail on elfin ID. Next. So for host plant ID, we'll discuss lupinous species first. To the right, we have the sundial lupine as an example. And most lupines or lupins have radial leaves that often appear purple at the edges, especially new growth in the spring. The flowers are blue, purple, or white. And for Baptisia species, we have the yellow wild indigo to the right. And wild indigos have leaves with 3 leaflets, like elongated clover leaves, and the stems may be purplish, especially on new growth in the spring. And the stems are also very smooth. The flowers are blue, purple, yellow, or white. So now I'll move it back to Katie.
Okay, so Becca, Ryan, and I will explain what the frosted elfin habitat and butterfly survey protocols are, how they're used, and how to record and submit your data. There are 4 primary objectives of the survey protocols, and we want to document the presence or probable absence of the species, derive an index of relative abundance of volant frosted elfin in habitat patches, estimate the amount, extent, and quality of frosted elfin habitat, as well as describe the correlation, if one exists, between habitat condition, and relative abundance of volant butterflies. So an overview of the protocol. There are 4 SOPs, each with their own data form. There's SOP1, the preliminary site evaluation, and the purpose is to document whether habitat exists and to recommend whether to conduct the elfin surveys. SOP2 is marking the habitat patch and conducting butterfly counts. And the purpose of this is to make an initial delineation of where habitat occurs at a site, and then conduct a series of butterfly counts, at least 3 of these, separated 4 to 7 days apart. And this is the key SOP for documenting frosted elfin presence or absence. SOP3 is the rapid habitat assessment, and the purpose is to assess the quality and abundance of habitat for frosted elfin. And then there's SOP4, surveying for frosted elfin larvae with ultraviolet light. And this SOP is only conducted if SOP2 results in 0 observation of adults. And it also serves to determine frosted elfin presence or absence by detecting larvae that might otherwise go unseen with daylight surveys. And if a site can only be visited one time, it is possible to do all 3 or 4 SOPs in one visit if the host plants are present. But ideally, there will be at least 3 separate butterfly counts. The rapid habitat assessment can be conducted on the same day as one of the butterfly counts, but ideally when host plants are in peak flowering. We'll also cover data entry and submission. So before heading out into the field, we recommend double-checking the list of survey equipment provided in the protocol. And this will help ensure efficient and accurate recording of the observed data. Each SOP has its own data sheet. There's A, B, C, and D for recording the observed data in the field. And in general, we expect that the data sheets will be returned to the respective state coordinator, and then they will submit compiled and reviewed results to us. And there are 2 convenient options for data entry, which I'll discuss later in the presentation. There's an Excel spreadsheet, which is provided by Renee Farnsworth, and Survey 123, which runs on most smartphones, iPads, or tablets. And now Becca will cover SOP1, the preliminary site evaluation.
So looking at SOP1, the preliminary site evaluations, the beneficial outcomes of SOP1 are to identify sites that are no longer suitable for frosted elfins. And these sites are critical for understanding the status of the species and the need for conservation. Another outcome would be to find restoration opportunities. So this protocol is important even if the site will not be surveyed due to lack of the habitat. Another outcome would be to confirm which sites merit a survey. So if a habitat is present, it will help guide where surveys should happen and help provide information about how to access the site. SOP1 is especially important for sites that have never been visited or have not been visited for many years. Next. So the best time to conduct SOP1 is early in the season when host plants are likely to be observed and just before peak butterfly activity. If a site is well known and has been visited recently, then it may not be necessary to conduct a site visit to complete the data sheet. Next. So the data sheet is pretty self-explanatory. Some key points are to obtain a landowner permission for the site before visiting it, and to document it under the describe access section of the form, which is there in the center, to let others know to do the same in future surveys. It's also helpful to provide information for accessing the site, such as where to park safely. And for this and all data sheets, we strongly recommend that the latitude and longitude coordinates be recorded in WGS 84 decimal degrees to the 6th digit. And this is to have a more precise location and to keep things consistent. If host plants are confirmed and the habitat looks suitable for frosted elfins, then circle yes to recommend this site for butterfly surveys. Otherwise, the recommendation is no, and SOPs 2, 3, and 4 are not used. Now I'll take it back to Katie for SOP 2.
the host plant patch and butterfly counts are conducted after answering yes to SOP 1. And the purpose of this SOP is to describe how to conduct butterfly counts, which involves necessary preliminary steps of delineating the host plant patch and marking the start and end points with a zigzag count path through the patch. And the start and end points will remain fixed for each survey, but the path between them may vary throughout the season. And the counts will provide critical documentation of whether frosted elfin are present, as well as an approximate index of their relative abundance. And butterfly counts involve a minimum of 3 counts, each survey 4 to 7 days apart. The initiation of flight period varies across the region. So in the south, it begins in mid-February and to late May in the north. Annually, it varies by 2 to 3 weeks depending on the weather, and the flight period for an adult varies from 2 to 6 weeks. So establishing a count path. The host plant patch may vary in extent from year to year, so its dimensions should be delineated every year. And once the plants have emerged sufficiently to identify the approximate dimensions of the patch, you want to record a starting point and an ending point at opposite ends of the patch. And then these points remain fixed for all butterfly counts throughout the season. And under SOP 3, you will delineate the patch boundaries more thoroughly. I'm going to talk about the walkthrough count. After filling in the event and environmental data on data sheet B, which I'll cover, move to the starting location and visualize a path through the patch that maximizes the view of host and nectar plants without stepping on the host plants. Then you record the start time and begin walking at a slow but steady pace. And you want to weave through the patch, passing by dense areas of host plants, but without stepping on them or doubling back. And then without pausing, you're going to tally the number of butterflies you encountered, and it's helpful to use a handheld mechanical counter. Then you're going to record the time, the butterfly tally, and the end coordinate when completed. So the walkthrough count should only be conducted under optimal survey conditions to maximize the chance of detection of butterflies if they are actually present. And the ideal survey conditions are temperatures ranging between 65 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't want to survey when it's raining. Wind speeds should be less than 20 miles per hour. And if the temperatures are below 70 degrees, then the count should only be conducted with mostly sunny skies and light wind. So data sheet B and the top portion of this sheet covers the observer, the site data, and environmental data. And it's important to note that the patch ID must be the same from SOP 1's data sheet A, and the patch ID must stay the same across all data sheets. And the bottom half of the sheet, it covers the patch count, the verification data, and the patch location. So this section is completed only for the first survey, as the start and end coordinates will not change for the season. Now I'm going to talk about SOP 3, the Rapid Habitat Assessment. And the purpose of this SOP is to provide a rapid assessment of the quality and the abundance of habitat available to the species. So the idea is to estimate the size of the habitat patch, the abundance of the host plants within the patch, and the condition of the patch, such as the degree to which shade trees are encroaching on the patch. And the information can be used to understand the importance of the patch to butterflies and how immediate management treatment may be necessary to maintain the patch. So SOP 3 includes habitat area, delineating the patch, the vegetation covered area, host plant species data, and host plant abundance data. The habitat area, so how to define a patch. You want to make sure that you're creating a convex shape that includes the majority of the host plants present. So on the left is an example of an appropriate patch delineation. You can see it contains most of the host plants. It's convex in shape. Whereas on the right, An example of what you don't want to do when defining a patch, which is there's a lot of empty space and the shape is either jagged or concave. So there are several ways to estimate the area of a habitat patch, which we will describe in the protocol with further details in an appendix. We suggest estimating the area while you're in the field using a smartphone with an application such as Google Earth or with a handheld GPS. These methods will result in a polygon with an automatically calculated area. And we're not expecting surveyors to submit these polygons, but we will accept them if they are submitted. So the cover data, this section is pretty straightforward, and it asks for information about the degree of shading of host plants, as well as estimating cover class of herbaceous and shrub cover. And the information provided is by visual estimates, and it does not require actually counting or measuring the vegetation. So the host plant species. Host plants vary across the region, and sometimes the host plant will not be listed on the data sheet. So you can circle other and then write it in. For example, in South Carolina, you may see Lupinus diffusus, sky blue lupine, and Baptisia sincera, Carolina wild indigo. And then the visual density, again, it's a qualitative assessment. So you're going to use assessments such as growing thickly, is it common, very sparse. And then you'll do the same for the walking density. It's impossible to avoid stepping on them. Feet are less than a yard from the nearest plant, often at least a few yards from the nearest plant. And again, to continue with the host plant abundance, you're only going to count host plants if they are larger than a milk jug or have a flowering stem, or if they form a continuous cover, and you can see the details on the back side of data sheet C. So this is the front of slide sheet and sheet C, and you can see the walking density and then the host plant count. So depending on the species of host plant, the multiplier varies. And this is how you get the host plant count, which you circle the appropriate range on the front of the sheet. But on the back of the sheet, a tally sheet is provided. So for lupine, you could tally the number of individual plants you see, or using a 1 meter by 1 meter plot or a 3 meter by 3 meter. And then the multiplier varies. So for lupine, if you're using a 1 meter by 1 meter, you will multiply by 20. So for example, 20 tally marks equals 200 individual plants. Whereas with Baptisia, you're going to multiply it by 10. So 10 tally marks equal 100 plants. And this is one of the biggest updates to the protocol aside from SOP4. And so now I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Katie. So I'm just going to go through SOP4, which is a new addition for 2021, where we're going to be surveying for frosted elfin larvae with ultraviolet light or a black light. This is going to be a supplemental method that we're using this year, and it's to be used after adult counts in SOP2. So once we have finished those 3 adult counts in SOP2, if there are sites that have 0 detections, but it is suitable habitat and the host plants are there, that's when we're going to want to use the blacklight survey. And it basically generally follows guidelines from SOP2. Just some general items with the blacklight. To get there, you'll use the frosted elfin patch count survey in survey 123. So you'll go to the count data, the survey type, and then select blacklight, and then that will give you the option for the blacklight survey. It's important to use a professional grade UV light. We're recommending the UV Beast, which was used in the literature. We did try out something that we bought off of Amazon, which didn't work quite as well. So if you have the ability, we recommend getting a professional black light. and beginning surveys at least 10 minutes after last light to make sure that it's dark enough to do the survey properly. Larval activity can occur for 12 weeks, anywhere from mid-April to mid-July, depending on your site latitude. And this can vary from 2 to 3 weeks each year, depending on the microclimatic conditions. So we want to determine the peak flight, which will then help you determine the peak larval period. So eggs hatch within a week and are active for 5 to 6 weeks thereafter. So when you're trying to figure out when to do this, larval surveys should begin 10 days after you establish what the peak flight is at that site or in your region. Just a quick walkthrough of the blacklight protocol. So you'll follow the same approximate path that you're using for the adult count. So we want to keep that consistent. We'll walk at a steady pace as you would with the adult counts. Don't stop to photograph. And larvae should be visible 2 to 3 feet away. So you should be able to keep a steady pace and still be able to identify the larva from 2 to 3 feet away. And you don't need to handle the plant or turn over the leaves or spend any amount of time at any individual plant. And then as far as scanning the host plant as you go, you'll just scan from top to bottom and then count and tally the individual larvae as you go along. For recording data, just as you would in the other SOPs, you'll record the start and end times so that we can capture that data. And then we'll use a paper data sheet to tally the position and instar stage as you go. So on this next slide, you'll see an example of that. So in the middle section here, you'll see position. That's the larva position on the actual plant. So we have 4 options. Either the leaves and canopy, on the stems or branches, the plant base, or perhaps in the ground or in the leaf litter. And then we broke size down into early and late instar, and we'll separate those by 8 millimeters. So anything less than 8 millimeters we'll call an early instar larva, and anything greater than late instar would be 8 millimeters. And again, you're eyeballing that from 2 to 3 feet away, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but you'll use that as a guideline for tallying as you go. And that's it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So there are 4 SOPs, and I just wanted to recap. SOP 1 is a one-time preliminary site evaluation to determine whether it's worthwhile to conduct the butterfly surveys. And then SOP 2 for repeated butterfly counts, which is expected to be used at least 3 times per season. SOP 3 is a one-time assessment of the habitat patch, and this is conducted later in the season when plants have fully emerged. And then there's SOP 4, which only occurs if SOP 2 results in 0 observations. Now I'm going to cover data collection and submission. And there are a couple different ways to collect the data. We know people have different preferences on how they collect, so we've developed 2 options for both data collection and data submission. We have the paper form. People can record their field data and survey 123, as well as Excel worksheets, which are provided by Renee Farnsworth. So after filling out the data sheets, they'll be transferred into the Frost and Elfin workbook or survey 123. And when you're recording on the data sheets, you want to make sure you're recording the correct GPS location. So sometimes with survey 123, if you're not recording it in the field and you go back to the office, it will record the location of where you are. So you want to make sure if you're using survey 123 that you actually enter the correct coordinates manually. So after filling out the data sheets and then transferring to the Excel worksheet, which is already set up, You have drop-down menus and having data validation rules that will help catch and correct misformatted data. So when you've completed your data entry, email your Excel workbook to Renee Farnsworth, and she's at the regional office. And just to go over Survey 123 a little bit, this is the preferred method for entering data, and people can use it right on their smartphone or their iPad or a tablet. And it's a simple form-centric data collection tool for fieldwork. And its ArcGIS organizational accounts allow you to log into the app and download any forms that may have been shared with you, and the link is provided. And you'll be required to use an organizational account. So again, you can contact Renee Farnsworth to help you and email her elfin123 in the subject. And then this helps us to identify contacts and ensure you receive updates on the data submission and access permissions that you might need. So to sum up, there are two workflows that allow you to collect and easily submit data compatible with the regional frosted elfin database. And then this is a link for the Frosted Elfin survey website. Here you can go, you can get more information and more points of contact. And we've also provided helpful links. So this is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Northeast Region Frosted Elfin website. And then from here, you can find the Frosted Elfin Habitat and Survey Protocol PDF format. And we will also be uploading that identification of Frosted Elfin and host plant PowerPoint. And then we provided a link to download ArcGIS Survey 123. And this is for the desktop app. And then on that website, they can help you to find the smartphone apps as well. And again, email Renee Farnsworth for Survey 123 permissions. And now I'd like to open it up for questions and feedback.
Feel free to type questions into the chat if you'd rather do that than speak up.
Thank you, Katie and Becca and Ryan.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if there aren't any questions, this is Steve Fuller. I'd just like to thank everybody for attending. I apologize right at the beginning of the webinar. I had a technical difficulty, and I was supposed to introduce the group, so I'm sure they managed it fine. But I do thank you all for joining. Best of luck on the your survey efforts this summer, and don't be afraid to reach out to anybody on our team if you need help. Oh, a question just came in from Jennifer Finfera. I hope I pronounced that right. With the black light, can you see any other larvae or just frosted elfin? I believe the answer to that is yes. You can see many different species that way. But Ryan, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. Depending on your region, there will be several look-alike species, but at a closer look, it's pretty easy to identify what's a frosted elfin and what are some of the others. And within the protocol, I maybe should have put a slide in there, but within the actual document, I have some photos of look-alike species and then some of the identifying characteristics to differentiate between them. So some examples are gray hair streaks, dusky wings, and things of that nature. So it's possible, but it'll probably vary depending on where you are.
Thanks, Ryan. Any more questions? All right, again, thanks everybody for joining, and great job to the team. Look forward to hearing from you all, and again, have a great season. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.